Assad regime fell down and urged the Syrians to return back to their jobs. Syria's new interim Prime Minister Mohammed al-Bashir takes charge, says he aims to bring back millions of Syrian refugees, protect all citizens, but the country faces a crash crunch at the moment. Meanwhile, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei alleges the toppling of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad was orchestrated by the United States, Israel, and a regional neighbor. Meanwhile, South Korea's political crisis deepens as the police try to raid President Yoon Suk Yeol's office. After India flags safety of Hindus, the Bangladesh government confirms 88 attacks on the minorities. Foreign Secretary of India Vikram Misri, he made his way to Dhaka, will tell you all about it. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrives at the Tel Aviv courthouse for the second day of his testimony in his long-running corruption trial. Indian Defence Minister Rajnath Singh meets Russian President Vladimir Putin, says India will continue to stand by Russia. Deadly wildfire fanned by strong winds destroys several structures and about thousands of acres in Malibu, California. Well, ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, we're going to try and dissect and decode what's happened in Kabul this very evening. A high-profile murder of nobody other than Khalil Haqqani, a top and key figure when you're looking at the Haqqani network and its working in the new Taliban post-2021. A high-profile Kabul bombing, it has certainly sent shockwaves across Afghanistan and the larger geopolitical region. This deadly explosion in question in Kabul targeted a high-ranking Taliban official, Khalil Haqqani, marking the most significant security breach since the Taliban's 2021 return to power. Khalil Haqqani, a key Taliban minister and member of the influential Haqqani network, was the Taliban's Refugees and Repatriation Minister. His death underscores a seismic blow to the Taliban's internal stability and their promise of restored peace in Afghanistan. The death of the minister, Khalil Haqqani, is the highest profile casualty of bombing in Afghanistan since the Taliban returned to power 3 years ago. And there was no immediate claim of the responsibility for the blast, but it seems like now Islamic State has in fact taken responsibility. And officials said that the blast struck inside the ministry corridors in Kabul. Now, Khalil Haqqani was the uncle of Sirajuddin Haqqani, the acting interior minister at this point in time, who leads a powerful network within the Taliban. And how was he killed? Let's talk about that a little bit as well. Reports tell us that a suicide bomber infiltrated the ministry. This suicide bomber posed as a refugee who was trying to seek assistance at the reception. And post-lunch, you had the attacker detonating the device, targeting Khalil inside the ministry corridor, which is when the minister was making his way. Post-lunch scenario. Now, it's important to talk about the Haqqani network here. You know about the man, you know about his relationship, his importance in Taliban, but he represents the Haqqani network, and he was an integral part of this Taliban-aligned faction, notorious for its ties with the Al-Qaeda and alleged operations out of Pakistan's Waziristan region. The Haqqani network's grip on the Taliban's interior ministry places it at the nexus of Afghanistan's security dynamics. So, let's try and understand who stands to gain from Khalil Haqqani's death, the suspected ISKP role and its broader challenge to Taliban's stability, implication for Taliban's claims of security and economic revival, Haqqani and Al-Qaeda links. Does this attack shift the power dynamics at play? And of course, you've got the refugee angle, which cannot be disregarded. New security challenges, are they in the offing? Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to dissect Afghanistan's fragile security scenario, what this attack reveals about the internal Taliban fault lines, and is this just the beginning of a broader destabilization? Joining me here on the broadcast is Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, former Indian diplomat, and Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, defense and geopolitical expert. A very warm welcome to both of you, esteemed set of panelists on the show. Ambassador, I'm going to come to you very quickly. Let's first and foremost try and understand who is likely to gain from Khalil Haqqani's death. The Islamic State has well taken responsibility, but if we could understand, who do you, according to you, is going to gain from Khalil Haqqani's death?
You know, as you yourself mentioned, there are certain fault lines which are quite visible within the Afghanistan government. And significantly, this killing of Haqqani has taken place just a few days after he criticized the Taliban supreme leader, Akhundzada. You may recall that at a public gathering, Sirajuddin Haqqani had said that he should not think, he means Akhundzada, should not think that just because he's in power, everyone should accept his words. So this had not gone down too well with some sections of the Taliban. And certainly the fissures within the setup of the Afghanistan government were quite evident. So while the Islamic State has, according to you, claimed responsibility, but it remains to be seen whether some of the elements within the Taliban setup were also directly involved because of the fact, as I said, there was anger about what he had said about the supreme leader. Let us also take into account the fact that this event could have some regional or even global repercussions, because if Afghanistan becomes unstable, then this is going to have some ramifications within the region, particularly in the context of the troubled relationship which Afghanistan has with Pakistan. Now, I think that the United Nations is yet to issue a statement on this. Of course, there was a bounty on Sirajuddin Haqqani, I think a $5 million bounty. It was from the United States. And the United Nations sanction list had included the Haqqanis. So let us see what the global ramifications are in terms of reactions which come in. But certainly, this incident reflects the fault lines which you referred to and which exist within the Afghanistan setup.
All right, Ambassador, many thanks for your opening comments. General Kulkarni, I'm going to bring you in your opening comments. Given the context of Afghanistan's very recent power struggle as well, what does this hint at? I mean, he's a big Haqqani network leader.
Definitely, Kabir, to add to what the ambassador has said, Haqqani network operates in conjunction with Pakistan and the ISI. And that is one thing which Pakistan was very confident about. It was the Haqqani network. Pakistan has fallen off from the Afghanistan Taliban, and now you find that Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan is creating enough to put Pakistan on its tenterhook. Having said that, to see what he's just said, the ambassador is absolutely right. To what he said about the leader, it was very important, because this is an affiliated group to Taliban, not the pure original Taliban, this Haqqani network. That's the first thing. Secondly, the ISIS, what is claiming that they would have done it, Afghani, the Taliban, does not like the ISIS influence. They would well be with the Al-Qaeda, but not with the ISIS. They don't subscribe to the views of the ISIS because they would lose. This Taliban and the entire Pakhtun, they are tribals. They have nothing to do with the ISI. They don't want their influence. They rather will be happy with what they have in Afghanistan. So there were fault lines, and those fault lines were clearly seen. And as such, imagine an interior minister's uncle, who was interior minister, knows everything was going on in Afghanistan. And despite that, the suicide bomber could move in, and then in the garb of a refugee would knock him off And though, of course, no official statement has yet come from Afghanistan Taliban per se, but well, it is accepted that, well, he is dead. There is no denying the fact, and therefore there is, I would say, a fault line that exists within Taliban, and Taliban also, if you now relate to what was happening in Syria. In Syria, the Afghani, the Taliban, the Pakistanis, this thing, were all participating and with Hezbollah against the Syrian government. So you notice all these kind of things that are happening over there. There are fault lines. There is no denying the fact, and it is for that reason. And his again claiming that there should be no refugees going out. You see the kind of imposition on women. The women or the medical, that was the last thing that the women in Afghanistan could take up, and that was also deprived of them, and they were in total distress, the women in Afghanistan, as to what is it that is going on. So there is so much of past struggle that led up to the Haqqani's death. Yes.
All right, General Main, thanks for your opening comments as well. I'm going to quickly go back to the ambassador. Ambassador Dayal, you know, given Taliban's promises of bringing back stability, bringing back peace in Taliban, they had about only 700 tourists before 2021, and you know, in 2023 we're looking at 7,000 tourists as well. How is this latest attack, this security vacuum that has now been exposed in Kabul, how is it going to hit their credibility and their governance stance?
Well, certainly Afghanistan was not going to succeed in attracting many tourists, because tourists do take a look at the security situation and the internal stability. And this incident, the killing of Sirajuddin Haqqani, would further highlight the lack of the security set up within Afghanistan. It also signals the fact that there are deep divisions which seem to exist within the Taliban network. As I said, Sirajuddin Haqqani had openly criticized the supreme leader, and naturally, there was a large segment within the Taliban setup which was unhappy with this. And some analysts are reading this incident where Sirajuddin Haqqani has been killed in this explosion as a signal from the supreme leader that dissidents will not be tolerated, and that people who try and oppose his leadership, that is the leadership of the supreme leader, will have to pay a price. So it's a warning to Sirajuddin Haqqani, and I think the entire Haqqani faction has to take note of this. Now, as you mentioned, there has been a close relationship between the Haqqani setup and Pakistan, and there are some differences which have crept in between the Taliban setup in Afghanistan and the Pakistani government. So this killing of Sirajuddin Haqqani would also send some meaningful signals to the Pakistan authorities. But by and large, this is more reflective of the internal situation within the Taliban hierarchy, and the signal, as I said, from the supreme leader that he will not tolerate any dissidents from any section.
No, you're absolutely right. You know, General Kulkarni, picking up from where the ambassador left us, what must be going on in the mind of Sirajuddin Haqqani at the moment? I mean, he's pretty much next in line if this was, you know, a targeted killing sort of an affair. With Jalaluddin out of the picture, you've got Khalil Haqqani out of the picture. I mean, the next top shot target has to be Sirajuddin Haqqani. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here.
Absolutely right, Kabir. There is no denying the fact. Taliban is crystal clear that it's sending clear signals to Pakistan, lay off. If there is something that you intend to interfere into Taliban affairs, and this kind of a setting up of saying, wanting to criticize the supreme leader, obviously they have paid price for it. And Taliban per se also, despite what has been said about, I just saw it in the YouTube that cricketers, marriage, this thing, the kind of pomp and show, it doesn't show that it is Afghanistan. And there was quite a few Taliban people over there attending to that wedding over there of a Afghani cricketer. So that is indicator that there is definitely much more than what we read. The media is projecting something, probably we're not getting adequate information from Afghanistan, but whatever that is, this kind of a fault line exists between the leadership, and this leadership is getting more in Sharia than it is wanting to say what the world expects of Afghanistan, and that Taliban is not living up to that expectation, is in fact going back again to the 18th century. And if that be so, with no women not being empowered, and the kind of laws that are being strictly observed, and this kind of killing now that are taking place, the fight that is taking place between Taliban and its proxy Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan and the Pakistani security forces, all that is happening between the Shias and the Sunnis over there is indicative that there is a lot happening in Afghanistan. And this particular killing is leading to all that. And of course, even they don't want the refugees to go out and be able to say something. They're wanting people back again into their country. All that is happening. I think there is no denying the fact that Taliban, the top leader, being eliminated, and that too so close. It's not so easy to have, even if you're a refugee, I'm sure they would be screening so many people before they go and get close to him as a suicide bomber, and knocking him off so close indicated that there is much more to read into it. And yes, the ISIS network would be working. The ISI in Pakistan has also got a real kick, and so is this Haqqani network, which was interfering or wanting to be seen as little different from Taliban, has also been given a clear signal: lay off or else you buy the same thing. And therefore, not just Khalil, I think even the interior minister should also be very careful. He also just might be on the hit list next.
No, you're absolutely right, General. Ambassador, the refugee angle that General Kulkarni was talking about here as well, and this bombing is actually, both the panelists are right, this is a larger signal. You can't go against the supreme leader, but you've got aid organizations that are working, and they're very crucial to make sure that the entire system doesn't cripple on its own head. Now, international credibility is certainly going to be hit. This is a double-pronged question to you, Ambassador. Firstly, you've got the Haqqanis, you've got Mullah Yusuf, the Hebatullah. This is a triangular contest. So help the viewers with the power dynamics at play and the credibility on the international level that's going to take a massive hit.
As regards the power dynamics, as I said earlier, the Taliban has various sections, and there is a struggle for supremacy. We referred to the remarks of Sirajuddin Haqqani challenging the supreme leader's position and his authority. So there have been indications that there are some fault lines and fissures within the setup. So as far as the power dynamics is concerned, it is evolving. It is changing from time to time. And this assassination, this killing of Khalil Rahman Haqqani could be a signal from the supreme leader to other sections, particularly the Haqqani faction led by Sirajuddin Haqqani, that he will not tolerate any dissent. And regardless of what the power dynamics may be, the supreme leader will try and assert his overall authority and his supremacy. Now, as far as the global ramifications, Afghanistan is unstable. It has been in talks with the Russians, and according to the media, there are some assurances from the side of Putin that there will be some sort of closeness which the Russians would try and extend to the regime in Kabul. But by and large, the Taliban are ostracized. They have not been able to receive global acceptance. So in that sense, they do not enjoy legitimacy in the global power dynamics. They are really supported by just a handful of countries. Now, the Middle East region has been thrown into even more instability because of the ouster of Bashar al-Assad. So if there are events to the east of Syria, for instance, Iran and now Afghanistan, that could certainly impact to some extent what is happening in Pakistan. And naturally, that would in turn have some ramifications for the wider South Asian region, because Bangladesh is also in ferment. So we do not want South Asia to be engulfed with instability. It is already evident in the Middle East. And if this instability extends to the east, into the South Asian region, it is going to be a cause of worry for us.
No, you're absolutely right, Ambassador. I think you've hit the nail on the head. These ramifications of instability in Afghanistan might just paint a West Asian picture in Southeast Asia as well. Well, I think we're going to leave it here, gentlemen. General Kulkarni, I did want you to have the last say, but it seems like we're completely running out of time. But needless to say, the dust is far from settling on this particular issue. We'll tomorrow, maybe in a few hours, understand how many other people, died in that particular blast in terms of collateral damage. Mind you, this is the Refugees Ministry. It happened inside the ministry corridors. What we're picking up from all those reports as well. So we'll have to wait and find out. But this certainly seems like a big message, a big warning. Could the Interior Minister be next on the list? Is Afghanistan going way back into the 1800s? Well, we'll have to wait and find out. Only time will tell. On that note, Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, former Indian diplomat, and Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, defense and geopolitical expert, many thanks for joining us here on Global Lens, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to slip into a quick commercial break here. But like the General pointed out, there's more to talk about in West Asia as well. There's much to talk about the Republican administration, and climate is a commitment. Don't go anywhere. You're watching the day's biggest news update. Shriram Finance, the nation's dependable finance partner, has tied up with Mr. Dependable. Rahul Dravid can be seen delivering the message of unity. Rahul Dravid is renowned for his team spirit and the ability to take everybody along. Similarly, Shriram Finance is standing with every Indian to help them turn their dreams into reality by offering them the best financial solutions.
जब जुड़ेंगे तभी तोड़ेंगे.
Shriram Finance. तो क्या अगर आज अकेले निकल पड़े, कल कारवां लेके चलेंगे. तो क्या अगर छोटे शहर में बड़ा सपना देखा, मिलकर मुमकिन करेंगे. श्रीराम फाइनेंस हर इंडियन के साथ खड़ा है क्योंकि भरोसा है हमें.
जब जुड़ेंगे तभी तोड़ेंगे.
श्रीराम फाइनेंस.
Jonty Rhodes and Alan Donald, they're kind of the reason why I started playing.
I think most young spinners, when they're growing up, Shane Warne was just everything, wasn't he? He was one of the greats of all time.
Playing against India was always challenging in India.
We're not allowed to bowl a bouncer, so that tells you that they want to see runs on the board. Clean ball.
It's totally different era you in and we are in.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News 9. The winds of change are blowing through Syria, needless to speak, as the new interim Prime Minister, Mohammed al-Bashir, takes the helm of affairs. In his first major statement, al-Bashir vowed to bring back millions of displaced Syrians, protect the citizens, and rebuild basic services. But he admits the challenges are certainly enormous. Syria's coffers are pretty much empty. There's a cash crunch, and the economy has been devastated by war and several sanctions, which are expected, well, some of them, to be lifted as early as next month. But the new administration faces the daunting task of rebuilding a nation shattered by a civil war, an elongated one, needless to speak, with entire cities in ruins and millions of refugees living in exile. The United States and global powers are cautiously engaging with Syria's new leadership, that you can see one of those first meetings taking place. But ties remain complicated due to the involvement of HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a group with jihadist roots. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken for the United States laid out clear expectations for the new government: respect minority rights, enable humanitarian aid, and prevent Syria from becoming a hub for terrorism. Meanwhile, hope and grief intertwine for Syrians preparing to return home. Refugees like Ala Jabir, who lost his family to last year's earthquakes, are hopeful for a better future but carry the scars of their struggles in exile. As the world watches on, one question looms: can this new chapter in Syria's history bring lasting peace and stability? Along the same note, you've got Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who has alleged that the toppling of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad was orchestrated by the United States, Israel and a regional neighbor, many suggesting he was pointing out towards Turkey. Now Tehran now calls for unity in Syria through national dialogue, even as it reflects on its decade-long support for Bashar al-Assad's regime to counter Western influence in West Asia. There should be no doubt that what happened in Syria is the result of a joint plan between the United States and the Zionists. Yes, a neighboring government of Syria has played, is playing, and will continue to play a clear role in this matter. Everyone sees this, but the main actors, the principal agents, the real plotters, the masterminds, and the command center are in America and with the Zionist regime. We have evidence. This evidence leaves no room for doubt. And again, picking up from where Ayatollah Ali Khamenei leaves us, US troops are staying back in Syria because they have an important mission to complete there. United States' Deputy National Security Advisor John Finner said the same in an interview at Reuters' NEXT conference in New York. Listen in.
So those troops are there for a very specific and important reason, not as some sort of bargaining chip. They're there, have been there now for the better part of a decade or more to fight ISIS, a terrorist group that threatened not just the United States, but many of our partners and allies all around the world, including in Europe and in the region. In fact, just a couple of days ago, to prevent ISIS from thinking it could seize any sort of advantage or opportunity based on some perceived vacuum after Assad fell, the United States took a set of strikes against ISIS that we announced to send the signal and to enforce the reality that ISIS is not going to be under less pressure because of the circumstances that have emerged in recent days. So we are still committed to that mission, which we think is fundamentally tied to our interests in keeping our people and our partners safe.
But hey, before we move out of the Syrian segment, we've spoken about pretty much every stakeholder here but the president, well, ousted president, if I may, Bashar al-Assad himself, because Moscow is Bashar al-Assad's haven for the time being. And even as the Kremlin plays down the damage to Russian influence in the Middle East from the fall of Syrian ally Bashar al-Assad, saying that its focus was Ukraine and that Moscow was in contact with the new rulers in Syria, it's a question of whether Bashar al-Assad's asylum in Russia a strategy or a necessity at this point in time. And another big and important question is whether Vladimir Putin's motivations for sheltering Bashar al-Assad is political leverage or strategic risk. When Russia intervened in the Syrian civil war in 2015, it helped tip the balance in Assad's favor. So his fall from power dealt a serious setback to both Russia and Iran, which is fighting a major land war in Ukraine, and to the other ally, which is battling United States-backed Israel across the West Asian region. Satellite images that you just saw off the port at Latakia, captured on Tuesday, revealed that several Syrian missile boats had been damaged or destroyed, reportedly caused by recent airstrikes that were designated and designed to destroy the former regime's naval fleet. The images, however, also showed that Russian naval ships have left Moscow's base at Tartus on Syria's coast, and some have dropped anchor offshore. Russia has a major air base in the coastal city of Latakia and its naval facility in Tartus. And Moscow, which has been an ally of the Assad regime for decades, is now scrambling to make a deal with the Islamist fighters to guarantee the safety of two strategically important military bases. But then again, in the heart of Damascus, amidst its historic souks, stands the Bakdash, a legendary ice cream parlor. And for over a century, it has been a beacon of Syrian heritage, resilience, and cultural pride, serving its iconic Arabic-style ice cream. Here's a report. Take a look.
This famous shop has been serving a much-loved Arabic-style ice cream for decades. But for many Syrians, years of civil war made visiting it impossible, until now. In the wake of Bashar al-Assad's ouster, tens of thousands of Syrians have returned to Damascus. And for some, like Ahmed al-San, visiting the Bakdash ice cream parlor was a priority.
Excellent. I swear to God, I haven't tasted anything like it.
The secret to this beloved dessert, sahlab, a special flour made from orchid roots. The ice cream is pounded by hand with meter-long mallets until it becomes soft and stretchy. Topped with a generous coating of pistachios, it costs just $1. Co-owner Samir Bakdash reopened the shop the day after Assad's fall. It was his way of celebrating the end of a government that oppressed Syrians for decades.
The shop is nearly 130 years old. The shop was established in 1895 by the founder of the shop, who is my grandfather, Hemdi Bagdash. Of course, since 1895, this path was continued by my father. May God have mercy on him, and my uncle too, still present, being very old. Now we are the third generation of the founders of the shop. We are running the store, me, my brother, and my cousins.
He insisted the signature recipe had not changed since his great-grandfather came up with it in 1890.
Well, crawling back to normalcy, but shifting our focus from Syria to South Korea, where the country's political crisis deepens as police tried to raid President Yoon Suk Yeol's office today, escalating an investigation into his controversial martial law declaration just last week. But as tensions rise, the raid faced roadblocks, with investigators unable to access even the main building. Now the fallout continues, with former Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun, a close ally of Yoon Sol-yuk, and top police officials now under arrest for their roles in the martial law declaration. Kim attempted suicide at a detention center but is reportedly in a stable condition. Adding fuel to the fire, lawmakers from both opposition and Yoon's own People Power Party are preparing for another impeachment vote this weekend, which has gained more traction than the first one. And if passed, the Constitutional Court would determine President Yoon Suk Yeol's fate. The nation is also witnessing public dissent. Workers from major unions, including metal workers and banking employees, have joined protests demanding accountability and swift resolution to the crisis. The situation remains precarious as questions swirl around Yoon Suk Yeol's leadership, with his office offering no clear stance on who is managing state affairs during this tumultuous period. The world watches closely as South Korea grapples with a leadership void and a constitutional crossroads, with K-pop style protest rallies taking place across Seoul. Meanwhile, there's another story, because once synonymous with South Korea's vibrant drinking culture, the street now sees half-empty pubs and bars lining its neon-lit alleys. And this transformation reflects a broader cultural shift that's also taking place in South Korea, where a once notorious drinking culture is evolving. With changing lifestyles, health consciousness, and new social trends because of social media, the nation's iconic after-work drinking marathons are becoming a thing of the past.
It used to be a hub for student nightlife in South Korea's capital, but Seoul's Nokdu Street is a quieter place these days. Formerly bustling pubs often sit half-empty, where drinkers once spilled onto the street. It's a telling sign of the decline in Korea's once notorious drinking culture. Pancake House owner Jun Jung-suk has watched it all.
거리가 그냥 머리밖에 없어, 까매.
She says the street used to be so packed you couldn't see the ground. The change has been driven by corporate Korea slowing down on after-work drinking bouts, called hueshik, once a near-obligatory part of workplace life. Female workers have been emboldened to say no to the drunken sessions, helped by a 2007 court ruling that it was an offence for senior staffers to force their juniors to drink. Many women have complained about sexual harassment and the impact on childcare. Meanwhile, high inflation and interest rates have left all consumers wary about spending. More young people are also rejecting the whole idea of basing social life around drinking. Son Hyun-seo is president of the Alcohol Reduction Association at Seoul's Samyuk University.
요즘 뉴스에 여전히 술로 인한 범죄가 많고
She says she decided to act after seeing friends get into danger when drunk. That leaves the city's nightlife industry nursing some big losses. An index measuring sales at local eateries hit a record low last year. The number of karaoke singing rooms has tumbled by almost 3,000 over the past 4 years. Back at the pancake place, Jun doesn't know what to do. She says she put the business up for lease 2 years ago and hasn't had a single inquiry since.
Well, time for another quick commercial breather here on Global Lens. But on the other side, top global developments, and like we promised, climate is a commitment here on News 9. Don't go anywhere.
Hello.
If your money is fraudulently taken by somebody or a cyber crime takes place with you,
क्या हम कृष्णा दास गुप्ता जी से बात कर रहे हैं?
and you report it to the bank within 3 days of the crime, the bank is liable to pay you 100%. This is clear-cut guidelines.
मैं डिपार्टमेंट से बात कर रहा हूँ.
If you report it within 7 days, the bank is liable to pay you 50%. And if you report it 21 days, I think 25% or something.
और हमने ये देखा है कि आपके आधार कार्ड से एक सिम रजिस्टर्ड हुआ है यहाँ.
If the person gives information within the span of 3 to 4 hours, 100% recovery can be done. I personally have seen a lot of cases where 100% recovery has been done.
आपका सिम यूज हुआ है, इलीगल एक्टिविटीज हुई हैं उस सिम से. Oh my God. Madam, you are also involved in the Naresh Goyal money laundering case.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News 9. And shifting our focus to our neighboring country of Bangladesh, where amid India raising concerns over the safety of Hindus in Bangladesh, the country has in fact now confirmed 88 incidents of communal violence targeting minorities, primarily Hindus, after former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was unseated in August. All of this according to corroborated reports now. As many as 70 people have been arrested in connection with the incidents of communal violence, said Shafiqul Alam, interim government head Muhammad Yunus's press secretary. The revelation was made a day after Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri expressed concerns over the attacks on minorities and conveyed India's concerns about their safety and well-being during discussions with the Bangladeshi leadership, as he was in Dhaka just about a day or two back. Talking to reporters, Shafiqul Alam said that 88 cases had been filed in incidents involving minorities between 5th of August and the 22nd of October. And Shafiqul Alam pointed out that the number of cases and arrests may go up as fresh incidents of violence have also been reported in northeastern Sunamganj, you've got central Ghazipur and other areas as well. Moving on, the United States' Missile Defense Agency successfully intercepted an air-launched intermediate-range ballistic missile target during a test off the Guam coast for the very first time. This achievement marks a significant milestone in enhancing the island's defense capabilities. Moving on, more than 100 people were killed in Sudan when 8-barrel bombs hit a market in North Darfur. This on Monday, according to pro-democracy and human rights groups. An activist also reported that most of those killed were civilians, with some bodies too charred or mutilated to be identified.
More than 100 people were killed in Sudan when 8 barrel bombs hit a market in North Darfur on Monday, according to pro-democracy and human rights groups. The location of this social media video was verified by Reuters, but not the date it was filmed. One activist said that while there are typically a few soldiers in the market in town, most of those present were civilians, and that some bodies were too charred or mutilated to identify. The army has frequently targeted towns in North Darfur with airstrikes as it fights the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, for control of the state capital. The army denied responsibility for the attack on the market, but insisted it had the right to target any location used by the RSF for military purposes. The RSF did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The conflict has been turning increasingly bloody as ceasefire efforts have stalled and crises elsewhere have dominated world attention. On Tuesday, the RSF aimed heavy artillery fire at an army-controlled sector of Omdurman, residents said. This video from the army-controlled Khartoum state government purports to show the aftermath. The group Emergency Lawyers said at least 20 people were killed, while the state government said 65 people died. At the Zamzam camp for displaced people in North Darfur, where famine has been declared, 7 people were killed in shelling on Tuesday, according to one official. Both sides have targeted densely populated civilian areas in the 20-month-old war. The army has stepped up airstrikes in the half of the country that the RSF controls, while the RSF has staged raids on villages and intense artillery strikes. The United Nations has said more than 30 million people are in need of aid, and some 12 million have fled their homes.
Moving on, the Chagosians in Britain fear fresh doubts over island sovereignty deal with Mauritius. They vow to protest at the British Parliament for a rethink. You've got a man who just lost his mother last month saying all she wanted to do was go back and stay on her island.
Frankie Bonton is a Chagosian living in Britain.
You know, my mum passed away in September this year, and one of her last wishes was to go there to see her island one more time.
His diaspora community has vowed to protest a deal struck between Britain and Mauritius that determines the future of their homeland without consulting them. In October, British leaders agreed to hand the Chagos Islands over to Mauritius while retaining control of the Diego Garcia military base for 99 more years. That's after forcibly removing Chagosians more than half a century ago from parts of the Indian Ocean archipelago to make way for the British US base.
Our people were sacrificed for Mauritius independence, for this military base, for the defense purpose of the West. What about us? What do we gain in return? A life in exile?
Bonton's family and the rest of the population were shipped to other British colonies in Africa, including Mauritius. Many were later allowed to move to Britain. Under the new deal, Mauritius can undertake a resettlement program on all islands except Diego Garcia. That's the archipelago's largest island and where most Chagosians lived. Like many in his community, Bonton says they weren't consulted on the agreement, so cannot endorse it.
Our views and opinion, we should be at the negotiating table, and they have to listen to us, you know. Because if they want to implement any resettlement plan or whatsoever, Chagosians should be involved. Simple like that, you know.
But since the deal was struck, high-profile figures have publicly criticized it, including new Mauritian Prime Minister Naveen Ramgoolam and Marco Rubio, US President-elect Donald Trump's pick for Secretary of State. Uncertainty over the agreement has given fresh hope to members of the Chagosian diaspora for a last chance to demand a rethink. They plan to protest at the British Parliament and are looking at options, including hunger strikes. Fellow British Chagosian Jemmy Simons underlined the trauma being inflicted on generations of those who were colonised.
If the government had bothered to ask any of the natives, even the descendants, they would have known that we are so set against this, because the pain that we went through, my grandparents' mother went through when they were exiled, there's no words for it. And for them to now lose their culture, their identity, and being told that they're not Chagosians anymore, they're going to be Mauritians, that is heartbreaking.
Well, shifting our focus to South America, you've got Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who was recovering in an intensive care unit after emergency surgery to drain a bleed on his brain linked to a fall back in October.
Inside this Sao Paulo hospital, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva was recovering after emergency surgery to drain a bleed on his brain linked to a fall in October. On Monday evening, after complaining of a worsening headache during talks with congressional leaders, Lula was taken to a hospital where an MRI scan detected an intracranial hemorrhage. According to doctors, Lula was quickly flown to Sao Paulo for the surgery. The 79-year-old was said to be in stable condition after a successful operation. Here's Lula's physician, Roberto Khalil.
Here in this unit, he underwent surgery to drain the hematoma and cleanse the brain. The president progressed well. He arrived at the surgery practically awake, was intubated, is now stable, talking normally, eating, and will remain under observation for the next few days.
He said Lula would return to Brazil's capital early next week if everything goes well. Doctors ruled out any injury to the brain or neurological complications. But the emergency surgery added to health concerns about the aging leftist president, who is halfway through his third non-consecutive term. Sao Paulo resident Carlos Douglas told Reuters he's worried that if something more serious happens, quote, "I'm sure it will affect the government."
Com certeza vai interferir.
Weak results for his Workers' Party in this year's municipal elections underscored the lack of a clear leftist successor if he chooses not to run for re-election in 2026. Lula has curtailed travel in recent months while doctors monitored his recovery from trauma to the back of the head when he fell at his home in late October, requiring stitches.
Meanwhile, global airline body IATA forecast industry-wide 2025 revenue of more than $1 trillion and record passenger numbers on Tuesday. And all of this despite what its chief, Willie Walsh, said were unacceptable difficulties in securing these new planes from the manufacturers.
Global airline body IATA has forecast industry-wide revenue next year of more than $1 trillion, as well as record passenger numbers. That's despite what its chief, Willie Walsh, said were unacceptable difficulties in securing new planes. Airlines around the world have seen their growth hampered by problems at Boeing and Airbus, and jet deliveries have been delayed. Without newer, more efficient planes, airlines say they cannot cut back fuel costs while flying more people. Walsh, who was previously head of British Airways and its parent company IAG, said suppliers were acting like quasi-monopolies, and that they appeared to be benefiting from the problems they had caused. Despite the issues, IATA said it expected the industry to generate $36.6 billion of net profit in 2025. That's up over $5 billion from this year's expected profit. Jet fuel prices are also set to fall, which is offering some relief. Speaking to reporters in Geneva ahead of an IATA gathering, Walsh was upbeat about the second term of US President-elect Donald Trump. He said that Trump's actions in his first term had boosted the sector. However, IATA did warn that uncertainty tied to conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine could pose risks to the sector. There's also concern over the aviation industry not moving fast enough to reach its targets for producing and using sustainable aviation fuel. Walsh said not enough progress is being made to reach the goal of net zero emissions by 2050. As it stands, sustainable aviation fuel makes up only around 0.3% of the world's jet fuel usage, and is projected to only account for 0.7% by 2025.
Like we've been saying, climate is a commitment here on Global Lens, and along the same vein, you've got the University of Birmingham in UK that has developed a wind turbine 7 times more efficient than a traditional one. And the blades for the turbine have been designed entirely by the use of artificial intelligence and can be modified specifically for the wind speeds and the urban environment of any specific locality. Here's a complete report. Take a look.
This wind turbine was designed entirely by artificial intelligence for a specific location. And that's why, according to its developers at the University of Birmingham, it's up to 7 times more efficient than a traditional turbine at low wind speeds in the city it's intended for.
So it is tailored to be optimally efficient for the specific city it's going to be operating in.
Dr. Kit Windles-Yule is the Director of Innovation at the university's College of Engineering and Physical Science.
The really exciting part of it is that every minute detail of the geometry of this wind turbine, every twist, every edge, every bend, every angle has been tuned and tweaked by our EvoPhase AI to be as efficient as possible for the specific wind speeds and specific topography of Birmingham, UK, where we're based.
EvoPhase, a university incubator venture, specializes in AI prototyping. The AI was only told that the blades should point upwards. From that point onwards, conventional research and development was abandoned. The software then hones its design from thousands of variations. It was completed in just over a week. Windles-Yule said the use of AI saves researchers years and millions of dollars in development. And he added that the energy it generates is enough to power an average European home.
This has the potential to be a real green energy revolution.
The team is now working on another design for the very different conditions in Edinburgh. They also want to apply AI-driven design to systems and machines in other sectors, such as catering and chemical manufacturing.
Well, our capacity to make sure that we can live sustainable lives, because take a look at what's happening on the other end. You've got droughts, famines, and sometimes wildfires as well, like this one, a massive one, fanned by strong winds burning just northwest of the city of Los Angeles, and has forced evacuations, knocked out power, and led to the closure of several roads in the area. We're talking about Malibu, California. The fire is estimated to be burning across an area of 2,200 acres, and 700 firefighting personnel are trying to bring the blaze under control.
A wildfire just northwest of Los Angeles on Tuesday forced evacuations, knocked out power, and closed roads. The Franklin fire spread overnight in Malibu near the Pacific Coast Highway that lies along the ocean out of LA. Los Angeles County Fire Chief Anthony Maroney said Tuesday that the blaze was uncontrolled.
The fire is currently estimated at over 2,200 acres, and we have 700 firefighting personnel assigned. Because of the great work of the firefighters that were on scene, we have only a minimal number of homes destroyed. Thankfully, we have no reports of serious injuries or fatalities, and this fire is not contained.
Burned homes smoldered on Tuesday as aircraft dropped red fire retardant on burning vegetation. Local resident Fred Roberts said winds in the area can contribute to fires.
This is a notorious area. The wind's coming straight down Malibu Canyon like a blowtorch. And so they're in harm's way every time there's a fire over there. It's a beautiful area, but you know, with all the trees and the landscaping, it's dangerous. I was going back to check on their homes, and I was actually thinking that it was going to be no big deal, but after I've seen this went and that one there burnt, I know this is the real deal.
Governor Gavin Newsom said California received a grant from the Federal Emergency Management Agency for resources to control the fire. The National Weather Service issued a red flag warning due to strong Santa Ana winds. Those winds come down from the southern California's Santa Ana Mountains, blowing hot, dry air from the east and raising the risk of fires. On Tuesday, Pepperdine University near Malibu ended a safety measure that required students to stay in the commons and library overnight due to the fire. It told students to stay on campus and avoid Malibu roads.
Well, with that, we've come to an end to this segment of Global Lens. But we're going to leave you with some of these drone visuals from across the Philippines. Drone footage by the Philippine Red Cross reveals widespread ash covering homes, the roads and the buildings nearby. All of this following the Mount Canlaon volcano eruption in Negros Occidental. Take a look at some of these visuals. It's not snowing. This is ash from a volcano. That's all the time we have for you this time around on Global Lens. We're going to see you again tomorrow, same time. Keep watching News 9.
India spends $75 billion on foreign cargo vessels.
$71 billion per annum. That's a lot of money.
Imagine a situation where 95% of our cargo is coming on ships which are not owned by us. If we are still not prepared, if someone were to say that we are not going to give you ships, then we'll be stuck. So the entire nation's economy is at risk.
We are very clear that shipping is also strategic, because without that you can't really be the third largest economy in the world.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.